Welcome, everyone, and especially to you, our dedicated listener. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Really glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, it's a special one. I actually want you to just go ahead and close your eyes for a second. We're going to time travel a bit.
Oh, I love this. Setting the scene.
Right. I want to paint this really visceral, chaotic, honestly overwhelming scene for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's high noon, September 16th, 1893, and you are standing right on the boundary line of the Oklahoma Territory.
And it is tense.
So tense. The air around you is literally vibrating. You can feel this sheer, unadulterated desperation just radiating off the crowd.
You're talking about what, over 100,000 people?
115,000 pioneers. It is a sea of bodies. Heavy black vests, soot-stained dresses, faded denim that has just seen way too many miles.
And the horses.
Yes. Horses rearing up in an absolute panic, hooves kicking up this thick, suffocating red dust into a sky that already looks like it's choking.
Yeah.
And everyone is just waiting, holding their breath, knuckles white on the reins, just waiting for the boom of a military cannon.
Because that cannon changes everything.
Exactly. The second it fires, it kicks off a terrifying, absolute life-or-death race for exactly 42,000 homesteads.
Which, if you do the math there...
Right, more than half the people there are going to lose.
It's an incredibly powerful scene to try and visualize.
Yeah.
If you really place yourself in that moment, the sensory overload is just staggering.
Oh, for sure.
Because you wouldn't just see the dust, right? You'd hear the frantic clanging of tin pails that people have frantically tied to their saddle horns.
Just a wall of noise.
Exactly. The sharp snap of white claim flags whipping in the wind, the terrifying creak of these overloaded wooden buckboards that look like they're ready to splinter into 1,000 pieces.
Wow.
And the smell. Imagine that thick mixture of horse sweat, dry clay, and that raw metallic scent of nervous anticipation.
It's so vivid.
It really is the perfect way to ground ourselves in the setting of the brilliant work we're exploring today.
Which is the novel In the Great Quiet by Laura Vogt.
Yes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive is to truly explore this incredibly rich piece of historical fiction.
And it is so rich.
And what makes it so gripping and honestly so relevant to us is that it's based on the author's real great-great-grandmother.
Minnie Hoopes?
Right, Minnie Hoopes. We aren't just looking at some classic pulp fiction Wild West story here, though it does play with those elements.
Oh, it definitely leans into them sometimes.
It does, but we are digging into Vogt's text to extract these profound nuggets of knowledge about what human survival actually looks like, and the highly shifting, unstable nature of memory, plus the hidden histories of women on the frontier.
Exactly. And this deep dive is perfectly tailored for you, the listener,
Yeah.
because it strikes a fascinating balance. It's really hard to pull off.
How so?
Well, on one hand, you have the thrilling, gritty adventure of a historical land run. The pacing is absolutely relentless.
It doesn't let up.
Right. But then the novel constantly hits the brakes to force us to confront these deep philosophical questions.
Yeah, about autonomy.
Autonomy, what it truly means to be part of a community when the chips are down, and our literal spiritual connection to the earth itself.
It operates on so many levels.
It does. It doesn't let you just passively consume the history.
So before we really get rolling and jump back into the mud, let's quickly set the parameters for today.
Good idea.
We are pulling our insights directly from a curated stack of sources. We've got extensive excerpts from the novel itself, the author's detailed historical notes at the end of the book.
Which are fascinating on their own.
They really are. And some fantastic behind-the-scenes commentary from the back matter.
Right. And it's important to note right at the top that while In the Great Quiet is a work of fiction, it deals head-on with very real, often very dark historical realities.
Yeah, Vogt doesn't sanitize the West.
Not at all. The text addresses the harsh truths of westward expansion, the strict property laws governing women, and the violent displacement of indigenous peoples.
Absolutely.
And as we go through this material, our goal is to impartially examine how the author weaves these heavy historical truths into Minnie's deeply personal narrative. We are exploring the author's specific framing of history, allowing the text to speak for itself without us taking a side.
Right, so you can see exactly how the fiction is built on these complex real-world events.
Exactly.
So let's jump right back into the action. Right back to that dusty boundary line, the starting line of the land rush.
Where we meet Minnie.
Yes, we meet our protagonist, Minnie. And the terrifying reality of this race is immediately apparent. She's sitting on her buckskin horse, Cricket.
Great detail.
Right at the edge of the territory. And there's a cowboy beside her. He's exactly what you're picturing. Chewing tobacco, slouching lazily in his saddle, holding a Winchester rifle.
The classic archetype.
Right. And he looks over at Minnie, curls his lip and sneers. "Where's your husband, doll?" Now, you or I might freeze up in that situation, but yeah. Minnie...
She doesn't miss a beat.
She just winks right back at him and lies completely through her teeth. She looks at this armed cowboy and says, "Buried that mouthy feller in the ground. Dug the hole myself."
I love that line so much. That interaction is so brief, just a few words, but it does an immense amount of heavy lifting in the text.
It really does.
It instantly shatters this pervasive myth we have of the fragile, quiet, Victorian pioneer woman.
Right, the woman who just passively follows her husband out west and faints at the sight of a snake.
Exactly. Minnie is surrounded by absolute life-threatening chaos, buckboards crashing into each other, criminals, a guy on a bicycle.
A bicycle, in the dirt.
In the middle of a stampede. And Minnie is completely unfazed by this cowboy's intimidation tactics. The author's note actually touches on this specifically, referencing what historians call the history of mentalities.
Which is a fascinating concept. Can you break that down for us?
Of course. The history of mentalities is a framework that basically says, instead of just looking at the laws and the wars of an era, we need to look at the psychological realities.
The everyday attitudes.
Right. The internal emotional lives of the people who lived then. The author uses this framework to argue that women of the 19th century weren't these dimmed, muted versions of humanity.
They didn't just quietly accept their lot in life.
No.
Yeah.
They had the same full spectrum of human emotion we do today. They were just as vibrant, gritty, sarcastic, and fiercely alive as anyone walking around right now.
And Minnie embodies that completely with that one comeback.
She absolutely does.
And the text gives us this incredible historical nugget to explain why she's out there, alone, dealing with these sneering cowboys in the first place.
This is crucial.
Minnie must remain single.
Right.
The property laws of the era, specifically how the government handled homesteading for women, dictated that if a woman married, she legally forfeited her land to her husband.
Under the legal doctrine of the time, her legal identity basically ceased to exist independent of her husband.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to truly understand the sheer desperation driving the women who participated in this land rush.
Because we usually think of the frontier as a place for men to seek their fortunes.
Exactly. But for unmarried women, widowed women, or divorced women, this race represented a rare, almost unprecedented gift of autonomy.
A loophole in the system.
A massive loophole. Minnie isn't out there for a casual adventure. She's risking her life, riding a single horse into a chaotic stampede of over 100,000 desperate people, because it is her absolute only shot at true legal and financial independence.
The stakes literally could not be higher.
If she fails, she goes back to being independent. If she wins, she owns a piece of the earth in her own name.
And we see that fierce, uncompromising independence play out almost immediately after the cannon finally fires.
Our race begins.
And it is sheer mayhem. Wagons crumbling, wheels flying off, horses collapsing in the dust from the heat.
Chaos.
Total chaos. Minnie's two brothers, Willie and Ezra, are in a buggy right behind her. And I have to mention this detail because it is hilarious.
Oh, the outfits.
Willie is wearing these completely ostentatious fringed chaps and a brocade waistcoat.
Ridiculous.
And Ezra is sitting there scowling in a heavy tweed waistcoat. It's like someone showing up to run a marathon in a full tuxedo.
They are so laughably unprepared for the reality of the West.
So unprepared. And sure enough, almost immediately, their buggy crashes violently into a muddy creek bottom. A wheel gets completely wedged in the thick sludge.
Naturally.
Now you'd think Minnie would hit the brakes, turn around, and help her family.
Right. That would be the expected thing to do.
But instead, she tosses Willie a shovel, tells them their plan is dumber than a sack of hammers, and rides off completely alone.
Leaving them in the mud.
Leaving them right in the mud.
It is a defining, almost shocking moment for her character. And it forces you to pause as a reader. I want you to really think about what that action represents.
Hold on, though, because I have to ask. She just leaves her family stuck in the mud in the middle of a literal stampede.
Yep.
That seems incredibly ruthless, maybe even deeply selfish. Is the author framing this as a heroic moment of independence? Or is this a deeply flawed, callous decision on Minnie's part?
That is the exact friction the author wants you to feel. It's meant to be uncomfortable.
Okay, that makes sense.
It isn't framed as purely heroic. It's framed as an act of absolute raw survival. It perfectly encapsulates Minnie's fierce, almost reckless drive for independence.
She has to choose.
Right. By riding away, she is literally and metaphorically leaving her past in the mud. She is actively shedding her family ties, rejecting their protection, and throwing off all those stifling societal expectations.
She tells her brothers she'll handle whatever comes her way.
She knows that if she stops to save them, she loses her claim. She chooses herself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because she rides off, she finds her plot of land, she stakes her claim by Crooked Creek, and she is out there all alone.
Completely isolated.
But as we get deeper into the book, we realize the story isn't just being told from Minnie's perspective.
This was such a surprising choice by the author.
The author introduces a completely surprising, incredibly powerful, non-human narrator. The Earth itself is a character in this book.
And it actually speaks to us.
Yes, in these interludes.
It's a brilliant, highly effective use of magical realism. And it completely shifts the tone of the book.
The Earth's voice is described as ancient, deep, and cavernous.
It speaks of being physically parched by centuries of drought. And it talks about the brutal arrival of the Industrial Revolution in these highly visceral, almost painful terms.
It feels metal veins being violently hammered into her arms, the railroad tracks.
Exactly. But most poignantly, the Earth speaks of the forgotten history of women.
Women whose stories were never recorded in the official history books.
Triumphs and tragedies that simply blew away and were lost like dust in the wind.
There's this one line that gave me chills. The Earth says, "Today I scream and you do not hear."
Wow.
It talks about how the heavy wooden wheels of the pioneer wagons literally scrape its skin and how the collapse of the wagons crushes its throat.
It's such a powerful, evocative image that makes the landscape feel like a living, suffering entity.
Functionally, from a literary perspective, what is this voice doing?
Well, it serves a massive thematic purpose. The Earth acts as the connective tissue between women across massive, sweeping spans of eons.
Creating a tapestry of ancestry.
Yes. Through the Earth's narration, we hear about Prairie Rose, a figure who blurs the line between a real historical woman and a localized myth.
We hear about Willie Matthews.
Right, a historical woman who drove cattle, dressed as a man just to survive. The Earth connects these past figures to Minnie in the 1890s, and then it even stretches the timeline forward.
To the 1930s Dust Bowl.
Exactly. The Earth describes a future homesteader named Gail clutching a damp cloth against her face against the swirling ash. The Earth acts as the ultimate, impartial record keeper of women's experiences on the frontier.
Holding the memories that society forgot.
Beautifully said.
So the reader gets this beautiful poetic context, but for Minnie, actually hearing these voices out on her claim is utterly terrifying.
She doesn't know what's happening.
She's out there on her quarter section, performing this back-breaking labor, digging trenches, getting snagged and bleeding from sandburrs.
Exhausted.
And suddenly she starts hearing the Earth complaining. She hears the whispers of these past women rustling in the wild ryegrass.
And she doesn't think it's magical realism.
Not at all. She genuinely fears she is losing her mind. She thinks she's succumbing to hysteria.
Which was a very common, highly weaponized medical diagnosis back then.
Used to dismiss women's mental health, silence their opinions, and strip them of their autonomy.
That fear of hysteria is very deeply rooted in her Western Victorian upbringing. The medical consensus told her that if a woman hears voices or is overly emotional, she's fundamentally broken.
She belongs in an asylum, not on a homestead.
But the text does something wonderful here. It contrasts this rigid, punitive Western fear with the spiritual wisdom of the Osage characters Minnie encounters.
Specifically, an Osage woman named Niabi.
Yes. Minnie visits Niabi's camp in a state of sheer panic, confessing that she thinks her mind is fracturing from the isolation.
And Niabi doesn't dismiss her or judge her.
She certainly doesn't try to diagnose her with a medical condition.
Instead, Niabi calmly tells Minnie the traditional story of Prairie Rose. She explains that the Earth wants to be known.
From the Osage perspective depicted in the novel, the world is not dead dirt. It is actively alive with spirit, history, and memory.
So Niabi doesn't think Minnie is crazy at all.
She believes Minnie is simply, finally, quiet enough to actually listen to what the land has been saying all along.
And boy, is it ever quiet out there.
Too quiet.
The text really goes out of its way to detail Minnie's intense, crushing isolation on her claim by Crooked Creek.
Vivid, almost suffocating sensory details.
The quiet isn't peaceful. It's described as deafening. It presses in on her.
You get descriptions of her drinking water from a tin canteen where she's boiled tea leaves.
But even the strong tea can't mask the foul, salty, alkaline taste of the groundwater.
And the heat is described as an oppressive physical weight. It's just her, the cracked red dirt, the relentless sun, and her horses.
I want you to really imagine being completely alone in a landscape that feels not just empty, but actively alive and haunted by the weight of the past.
The text poses this chilling psychological idea that in isolation, one slips toward oblivion.
The human mind desperately needs tethering.
It needs reflection and connection to maintain its shape. For many, ironically, these seemingly terrifying magical voices actually begin to act as a psychological anchor.
They prove to her that she isn't actually alone.
Even in the deepest, soundless quiet of the frontier, she is part of a larger, enduring, resilient community of women that stretches backward and forward across time.
Keeping her from slipping into that oblivion.
Exactly.
So she's out there, terrified of these voices, clinging to her sanity. But what the earth is whispering about.
The violence, the buried histories.
Right, the blood spilled on the dirt. It starts to mirror Minnie's own physical reality in a terrifying way.
Because she isn't just hiding from the quiet out there.
She's actively hiding a body.
Yes. And that brings us to a really grim, unromanticized reality of the frontier.
The land rush didn't just bring hopeful farmers looking for a fresh start.
It brought desperate, ruthless people who saw opportunity in the chaos. The campfire lore leading up to the race was filled with warnings of robbery, assault, and murder.
Out in the territories where the law couldn't reach.
And Minnie herself admits early on, almost as a point of pride, that she possesses a natural lawlessness. She thinks it might finally have some actual value out there.
Which brings us to Minnie's dark secret. And this is a massive structural reveal in the book.
Huge.
Minnie isn't just a plucky homesteader trying to grow potatoes. She is a killer.
The text reveals that shortly after she claimed her land, a group of outlaws attacked her.
They set fire to her quarter section, trying to drive her off, or worse.
And in a desperate act of pure self-defense, she shot them.
But then, instead of riding into town to report it, she buried their bodies out in the wildwood to hide what she'd done.
And she is left with this visceral, physical reminder of the violence. A dark maroon blood stain right on the beautiful indigo flowers of her bluebonnet skirt.
And no matter how hard she scrubs that fabric with harsh lye soap down in the creek, the stain won't wash out.
It's a literal and metaphorical mark of Cain.
This raises an important question, maybe the central question of this section of the novel. How does a person live with such profound trauma in total isolation?
Minnie's instinct is to try and bury the truth.
Yeah.
Literally in the dirt and deep in her own mind.
To protect her safe haven.
She is absolutely terrified that if local law enforcement or roaming vigilantes find out what happened, they won't believe it was self-defense.
They'll just see a single woman who killed men.
And they will take away the land she just risked everything to claim. She makes a calculated decision to choose secrecy over truth as a pure survival mechanism.
But the novel makes it very clear that secrets have a heavy cost.
Always.
We see this play out tragically through her relationship with Olive Brown, her nearest neighbor.
Olive is this wonderful, shining character. She represents resilience, civilization, and hope on the prairie.
She comes over bringing a freshly baked buttermilk pie. She wants to borrow dime novels for her daughters to practice reading.
Stubbornly seeking to build a civilized community in the dirt.
But eventually, the guilt of the murders and the pressure of the isolation become too much for Minnie. She breaks down and confesses what she did to Olive.
And Olive is absolutely horrified. She recoils.
And it is crucial to unpack why Olive is horrified. Her reaction is complex.
It is. It's not just the act of killing that repulses her. Olive is horrified because Minnie's lie put the entire surrounding fragile community at risk.
By hiding the bodies of missing outlaws, Minnie inadvertently drew the attention of dangerous vigilantes and angry posses to their area.
Those men come looking for their missing friends. Minnie's secret actively endangered Olive's husband and her young children.
The author uses this emotional rupture between the two women to explore the extreme fragility of trust in a lawless land.
One person's secret can burn down the whole neighborhood.
Minnie realizes in that devastating moment that true independence isn't about walling yourself off completely from the world.
It isn't about being an island.
It's about finding people who can handle your dark spaces, committing to the hard, messy work of getting through what Olive calls the tricky bits together.
You can't survive the frontier without trust. That is a fundamental evolution for Minnie's character.
She started the race believing independence meant total isolation,
leaving her brothers in the mud. But the harsh reality teaches her that interdependence, honest community, is the only way to actually endure.
So if isolation isn't the answer, why did Minnie run away so fiercely in the first place? Why was she so determined to leave her family behind?
The text transitions beautifully through these dreamlike flashbacks to reveal her childhood back in Kansas.
And compared to Oklahoma, it was seemingly idyllic.
The author creates a very stark, deliberate contrast here. The brutal red dirt reality of Oklahoma versus the soft, nostalgic memories of Kansas.
Catching fireflies in the tall summer grasses, reading Calamity Jane dime novels perched high up in a massive live oak tree.
Attending warm, intensely communal revival meetings in Topeka. She grew up with her adopted sister Magnolia and their neighbor Lark.
It paints a picture of a perfect, unbroken, innocent youth.
But nothing is ever that perfect. That perfect youth violently fractures.
Through the flashbacks, we learn that Magnolia ends up engaged to Lark, the man Minnie always secretly thought was hers.
But here is the gut punch. Minnie isn't just a tragic victim of a broken heart.
The guilt she carries, the reason she is running so hard, is twofold.
She confesses to a character named Stot that the night before Lark and Magnolia's wedding, she slept with Lark.
The emotional complexity of this betrayal is staggering. It reframes her entire journey.
Minnie isn't just fleeing a sad situation. She is actively fleeing her own terrible, destructive mistake.
She tells Stot this dark truth because the guilt is suffocating her out there in the quiet. The silence gives her nowhere to hide from her conscience.
And the text uses this revelation to explore how memory itself is unstable and amorphous.
As Minnie sits out there reflecting, she realizes she might have completely invented a version of her childhood that never existed.
She realizes she idealized Magnolia, casting her as fragile. And she fundamentally misunderstood her own desires regarding Lark.
She realizes she didn't truly love Lark the way a wife loves a husband. She just fiercely loved the idea of their childhood bond remaining unbroken, and lashed out when it changed.
It's such a mess of human emotion.
And into this mess enters Stot. James Solomon Stot Tharp.
Stot is such a great character.
Back before the race, Willie warns Minnie that Stot is the lawman. He's built up as this notorious, cold-blooded gunfighter.
A man so dangerous he supposedly spooked the Dalton gang.
You expect him to be terrifying. But as Minnie gets to know him, he turns out to be this incredibly complex, gentle, steadying presence.
He doesn't act like a chaotic outlaw at all.
He quietly helps Minnie fix the popped, warped boards on her homestead. He sits with her and gently reads from her mother's delicate hymnal.
And crucially, when she finally confesses her absolute darkest secrets to him, both the murders and the betrayal of her sister.
He doesn't flinch, he doesn't judge her, he just listens.
But there is a massive amount of narrative tension built into their relationship.
Because Stot is an honorable man, perhaps to a fault.
He eventually reveals to Minnie that he's engaged to be married to his brother's widow, Clara.
An engagement born entirely out of grim duty, not love.
He feels obligated to protect Clara and his nieces, who are struggling to survive on a freezing homestead up in North Dakota.
It's a classic Victorian sense of obligation.
But Minnie, fiercely protecting her hard-won independence, refuses to play second fiddle to a ghost or an obligation.
When he suggests a compromise, she looks at this dangerous gunfighter and tells him point blank, "I'm not something to be owned."
Such a powerful assertion of her autonomy.
She'd rather be alone than be a secondary concern. But the resolution of this tension is beautifully handled.
Stot receives a letter stating that Clara has actually found someone else to marry, freeing him from his brother's obligation.
He is free to choose Minnie, but here is a brilliant part. They don't rush down to the church for a traditional Victorian wedding.
Because if they do, the property laws kick in, and Minnie instantly loses her land to him.
So instead, they choose a different path. They build a partnership based on mutual respect, shared trauma, and a deep understanding of each other's flaws.
What's fascinating here is how the author deliberately plays with and then completely subverts the established historical tropes of the genre.
You expect Stot to be the classic lone cowboy who sweeps in to save the day, and Minnie to be the damsel in distress.
But Vogt completely flips that script. They aren't archetypes. They are two profoundly broken, complex people who consciously choose to heal together as equals.
They actively reject the patriarchal societal expectations of their era to forge a relationship that actually works for their survival.
And this beautiful personal healing directly mirrors her return to the broader pioneer community.
After all the tension, we finally get these incredible, joyous scenes of reconciliation.
The massive barn bee at the Browns' homestead.
Everyone from miles around gathers to raise a new structure together, and Minnie is there.
She isn't hiding anymore.
She is dancing under the massive Oklahoma sky, spinning through breathless polkas with her neighbors,
Making amends with Olive.
offering to teach Olive's daughters how to read using battered dime novels and a McGuffey's second eclectic reader,
She actively steps back out of the shadows and into the light of community.
which perfectly connects back to the grandest theme of the book. The land returned Minnie to herself.
She didn't find peace by walling herself off. She found it by actively integrating her past, owning her mistakes, listening to the ancient voices in the soil, and bringing all of that into a new, chosen community.
True strength isn't facing the world alone. It's facing the world alongside others, carrying your scars openly.
So well said.
So, what does this all mean for us reading it today?
Laura Vogt pulls back the curtain in her historical note at the end of the book.
As we mentioned briefly, Minnie Hoopes was a real flesh and blood woman, the author's great-great-grandmother.
And James Solomon Umstott Tharp Stot was her real great-great-grandfather.
The author is engaging in feminist revisionist history.
But her goal isn't to paint a perfect, sanitized picture of her ancestors. It is to paint a true one, full of flaws, grit, and moral gray areas.
And crucially, the author explicitly acknowledges the incredibly dark, violent foundations of the land rushes.
Vogt points out in the back matter that colonization is inherently built upon brutality.
The history of frontier settlement wasn't just brave pioneers building cabins. It involved the forced removal, systematic displacement, and unspeakable violence against indigenous tribes who were already living on that land.
To highlight this duality, Vogt quotes the Osage writer and historian John Joseph Matthews. He wrote that where the Native American passed in dignity, the white man plundered and wasted and shouted.
It's important to note that we are exploring the author's intentional framing of this history. We are looking at her deliberate choice to place her ancestors' story of survival directly alongside the violent realities of displacement.
She isn't letting the reader off the hook.
It adds such a profound layer of weight to the story. And while acknowledging that heavy history, the author also has a lot of fun blurring the lines between fact and fiction in the back matter.
There are these great little behind-the-scenes nuggets.
Like the crossword puzzles. Minnie does crossword puzzles to pass the long winter nights. The author openly admits this is an anachronism.
Right. They weren't invented until decades later.
But she included them as a loving homage to the real Minnie's hobbies later in her life.
And we also get a fully functioning recipe for Verla's homemade ice cream, named after the author's grandmother.
Calling for junket tablets, an old-fashioned rennet enzyme used to curdle milk. It's those tiny domestic details that make the era feel so lived in.
Those specific details perfectly illustrate how the book blends deeply personal familial memory with the broader official historical record.
A patchwork quilt of memory, exactly as the Earth character describes it.
It asks you, the listener, to pause and consider what stories your own ancestors left behind. How might those narratives have morphed or been sanitized?
And how do those inherited stories shape the person you are today?
What an absolute incredible journey we've been on with Minnie Hoopes today.
From the chaotic, muddy starting line of the 1893 land rush, through the profound isolation of Crooked Creek, all the way to her reconciliation with her past.
It is a monumental story of grit, the cost of survival, and finding your place in the world.
The core takeaway I want you to leave with today is that history isn't just a dry list of dates and battles.
It is the gritty, messy, and sometimes profoundly magical lived experiences of everyday people. Flawed people like Minnie and Stot, simply trying to carve out a place to belong.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this deep dive into In the Great Quiet.
It's been fantastic.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We spent all this time talking about how the red earth in Oklahoma held the memories, the blood, and the voices of the women who walked it centuries ago. But what about the ground you are standing on right now? If the soil beneath your own feet suddenly found its voice, whose forgotten secrets, silent struggles, and hidden triumphs would it whisper to you?